Welcome to Spectacular Chicago. Today we'll be talking about the City of Chicago's interest in reducing the speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles an hour and why that's a bad idea. We'll also touch on why the City of Chicago was used to spotlight focus on what's wrong with America and why Kamala Harris didn't prevail in the election. So first, I'd like to go on screen with City of Chicago speed limit sign. So, City of Chicago is discussing and has discussed and is likely to reduce the Chicago default speed limit to 25 miles an hour. How that will increase traffic congestion, how it's going to reduce safety and increase pollution in the City of Chicago metropolitan area. There has been no study tendered, proffered by any of these illustrious alders and our good Mayor Johnson as to how that's going to affect traffic, pollution, congestion. Off screen. Each time you add bike lanes, you add parking to the streets, you narrow the streets, you do all these things, it increases congestion. Think of the human anatomy. You have a blockage in one area, it's a blockage for the entire body. You notice considerable amount of traffic on City Chicago expressways. You have an accident in one area, it messes up the whole structure. So by reducing the speed limit from 30 miles an hour to 25, it's going to increase the dwell time that cars are on the streets, sitting there. It's going to increase the pollution. It's going to increase the traffic congestion on the highways and the arterial streets. Nobody thought that one through. It's going to decrease safety as we have stoplights. People are going 25 miles an hour. That yellow hits, you're not traveling fast enough to get through it. And by the way, what a yellow light does, it's supposed to tell you it's time to stop if safe to do so. But that's not how the system's working. Let's go online with the red light camera. So my position is the City of Chicago is basically scamming its residents by maintaining and perpetrating this fraud on the public. Red light cameras, speeding cameras, it's not helping City of Chicago residents. If you've ever received one of these things and you say, okay, I couldn't stop in time, they reduced the yellow, it's a fast yellow, I'm in the intersection, somebody's behind me, they're not stopping, and you go to one of these so-called administrative hearings. Let's go online with the illustrious 400 East Superior Street, Exhibit C. Now this is where you go to get your due process violated. Patently violated of due process, and it actually merits a class action lawsuit. You go there before a so-called administrative judge. In all other counties, you go to traffic court, you have a judge, you have a prosecutor, and you talk to the prosecutor, you explain, maybe he'll say, okay, you're right, it's a bad ticket, goodbye. You go to this place, they're not going to give you the time of day, they don't have to, and if you want to appeal one of their bad rulings, you got to pay $400 to appeal their bad rulings. Off screen. And by the way, for those of you that like to contest your ticket online, don't do it. They're going to sit there and deny it. I see people daily. They got a ticket. It's not my car, it's not my license plate, it's coming to me, it's in my name. and they can test it online. I wasn't in town, my car was in the airport, all these things. Tough luck, Charlie. You violated the 21 days. We're not going to help you. And then pay $400 to appeal it. And by the way, with the hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of tickets that are being issued, all of the jurisdictions require you to have a reviewing officer, not an agent, an officer, a police officer. And I suggest they're not doing that. How do they have somebody review 1 million tickets? They don't, and they just send them out. Wrong address, you didn't get it in the mail, as reliable as U.S. mail is, right? You know, they're not stealing anything. You just get your mail. So many people have claimed, hey, I didn't get my ticket in the mail. Well, it doubles, it triples, then they boot your car. So let's go on to the illustrious Department of Finance, put them on Exhibit D. The Department of Finance is where you go at City Hall to pay your tickets. Another thing they offer and provide is if you have a ticket, you can go to them or you can go online and put your plate in and see if you have a ticket. Now, I went through that process on a ticket that I knew was bogus, but I said, hey, is there a ticket for this license plate? Let's go off screen for a second. Here's a license plate, tell me if there's a ticket. Well, there was a ticket for it, and actually I took the liberty to visit after a week when the flashing lights appeared. No, there's no ticket. Okay, check back another month, no ticket. 6 months. Oh, there's a ticket, and it's no longer $100, it's $244. So these people are scammers. They're violating our due process. They're stealing from us, essentially. Okay, let's go to, I want to discuss the Chicago speed cameras that they're contemplating imposing. Let's go to Exhibit E, our illustrious City Hall. So Chicago speed cameras collected $28 million less through September 2024 than during the first 9 months of 2023, but two things could drastically change that. First, city leaders have considered lowering the citywide limit from 30 to 25 miles per hour. Second, Mayor Johnson has an initial okay for more speed cams to raise $11 million next year to restore police positions related to the federal consent decree. What? You mean Chicago Police Department is not already following the consent decree? Following consent decrees are optional here in this city, I guess. So during his campaign for when he ran for mayor, Johnson told voters a lower speed limit was nothing but a cash grab. He promised to eliminate speed cameras, calling them regressive taxation. Of course, he was right. But now that he wants a budget at the time to spend nearly $1 billion more in Chicago that we'll receive, it is clear he sees speed cameras as money machines. Regressive taxation and cash grabs are okay when he needs cash. It's like your ex-wife. You know, you have a divorce decree in place and she runs out of money, she comes back to you in court and tries to take more from you. Best analogy I can come up with. So speed cameras issued $54 million worth of fines between January and September 2024, which was, again, $28 million less than during the same period a year earlier. So people are onto the scam, and they're trying to comply. So now that they're complying, they want to change the rules. So while 1.18 million tickets were issued, just 804,197 carried fines, and the rest were warnings. So that's pursuant to a FOIA request. 2/3 of the fines were paid on time, but more than half of the revenue came from late fees, as I described earlier, our illustrious Department of Finance. Late penalties more than double the cost of a ticket, camera ticket, turning a $35 fine into an $85 fine. That's not double, but if you got a $100 fine, it turns into a $244 ticket, and that's what happened on the last example that I gave relating to the red light camera. So about $35.2 million worth of ticket revenue came from $35 fines for driving 6 to 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, with 1/3 of those tickets incurring a late fee. That's big money. The remaining $18.8 million in revenue came from 11 mile per hour plus tickets, which incurred late penalties at an even higher rate of 41%. So a lower speed limit could hit Chicago drivers hard. And then as an example, one city saw speed camera tickets increase 81% when it dropped its limit. So after 18 months, the revenues were still 75% higher. So they're going to screw us just for being out and driving. I tell you what, I tell you this. Let's go off screen for a second. I tell you this, with the AI technology they're employing, you're going to get a ticket for trouser cough for being on the public way. When that happens, you'll know what to do. Off screen, back to the city. So that was essentially Chicago's experience after former Mayor Lori Lightfoot lowered the speed camera threshold to fine drivers going 6 to 10 over the limit. Chicago speed cameras churned out 8 times as many tickets per day in the last 7 months after Lightfoot's change. So there are 7 $1 million camera areas. So right now there's 165 speed cameras during the first 9 months of this year. 7 of the cameras managed to each issue more than $1 million worth of fines, not including late fees. So West Pullman neighborhood on the southwest side, 40,752 tickets. The top performer was a camera at 445 West 127th Street, 1.26 million worth of tickets to motorists. I don't know. Those appear to be south and southeast parts of the city. In one hand, Mayor Johnson is elucidating about reparations. On the other hand, I'll say this. To me, those neighborhoods are probably predominantly African American. He's pulling it out of their own pockets. So I'm sorry, Mayor Johnson, but you need to be called out in this. Now, Chicago speed cameras issued a total 804,197 tickets, carrying a fine so far this year, and that's about 375,523 fewer tickets that were issued in the same time, January and September 2023. So that's $28 million less revenue, and they want to make up for that shortfall. So since they were turned on in 2013, Chicago speed cameras have generated $933 million for the city, sending at least 10,318,536 tickets to motorists. They have reviewing officers for all these. Police officers are actually reviewing these tickets. If they tell you so, it's BS. That's more than 3 tickets per Chicagoan, or a ticket for 4 of every 5 Illinois residents. And then they talk about safety for reducing the speed limit, or more cameras making it safer. So they did a decade-long study of collisions around Chicago, and speed cameras showed total crashes declined by 2% between 2012 and 2022. Now, there's pandemic in there. I don't think the figures should be followed. And then it's compared to a 27% increase in collisions citywide during that time. Why is that? Well, we talk about the count of speed-related crashes around cameras dropped by 16%, while the city recorded a 22% increase in speeding collisions. Bicycle and pedestrian crashes also fell by 44%. Well, that's because they're putting in bike lanes. Now, the Chicago Collision Study indicates speed cameras reduce total crashes around 53% of camera sites, but there's no empirical data that suggests that it's changed driving habits anywhere else, because as I see it, there's a lot more accidents. And they say the pedestrian incidences have increased. And then the University of Chicago research chimed in, and they said and concluded there was little relationship between the number of tickets issued and the safety impact of cameras. So when it comes to the lower speed limit, a 29 Vision Zero study, I don't know who they are, it's online, examined the traffic safety impact of New York reducing its speed limit from 30 miles per hour to 25 miles an hour on streets without posted speed limits, found there was no measurable change in fatalities. Now, this is New York, and their streets are a lot worse, narrow than ours. They don't even have alleyways. They put their trash out front in case anybody's been there on trash day. It's pretty bad. Okay, so all this begs the question, are cameras about safety or about cash? You tell me. You tell me. The answer seems pretty clear in the city facing, at the time, nearly a $1 billion budget deficit. So let's go online with Mayor Johnson. Eureka, I have found it. So Johnson pledged to phase out speed cameras during his final televised debate against mayoral challenger Paul Vallas. Anybody remember who came in town on Johnson's behalf? I'll give you a clue. Bernie Sanders, a dyed-in-the-wool communist. He comes to Chicago and stumps for Mayor Johnson. What kind of agenda do you think that portends? So the Sun-Times mayoral candidate questionnaire, Johnson said, I quote, "The choice should not be between inequitable, regressive taxation and the potential for increased traffic violence. Lowering the speed limit is a cash grab and has not proven effective in making our streets any safer," end of quote. So, I don't know, right out of the communist playbook, promise something, and don't deliver, and then take your money. So, according to CWB Chicago, and I have no idea who they are, I just found some stats. Johnson said on the campaign trail that speed and red light cameras were, quote, an easy revenue grab by the city, and they're horribly unfair. Yet in his latest budget, he's going to go right ahead with it. And then, Johnson's 2025 Chicago budget originally counted on residents paying about $325 million in fines, forfeitures, and penalties to remain balanced. $22.3 million less than was budgeted for 24. So forcing a nearly $1 billion shortfall for the city budget in 2025, Johnson has since proposed installing new speed cameras across the city to ticket drivers and raise $11 million. Well, it's going to be a lot more than that. I tell you that. They're going to raise a lot more than $11 million, and they're not going to stop there. So Johnson's support for a recent proposal to reduce speed limits across the city from 30 to 25 miles per hour starting in 2026 could end up driving revenues higher than expected. And that's what he's counting on, and that's why that recent budget passed. We were sold out like slaves up the river. We have become the new American slaves, Mayor Johnson. So there was a 2020 study from the Journal of Public Economics found the number of speed camera tickets issued in Sao Paulo, Brazil. You have to go with major metropolitan cities for comparables. After the city reduced the speed limit by about 13 miles per hour, increased 81% in the immediate aftermath of the policy change. What's going to happen in Chicago? It's going to be a bloodbath. So this surge in speed camera tickets declined about 6 months after the speed limit reductions, but not by much. So they only later remained about 75% of where they were before the change. So we're going to have about, let's be conservative, 50% more tickets. You do the math. So after Mayor Lightfoot lowered the speed cam ticket threshold in March 2021, Chicago saw a similar surge. So less people driving, pandemic, people are trying to follow the law, just do the best they can, and she sticks it up their behind. Can we all go off screen with, I can't look at Mayor Johnson's beard too long, it makes me dizzy. Has it occurred to you, Mayor Johnson, that Chicagoans do not share your vision? Sir, adjust your income to your lifestyle, or adjust your lifestyle to your income. That's how it works. Stop spending the money on whomever and whatever fits your fancy. You're an elected public official. You have a fiduciary duty to not keep spending. I know 5 business owners. They want to leave. If that property tax increase had gone through, I know for a fact that 3 out of those 5 that I canvassed, interviewed, they were going to leave Chicago. They're sick. They're just sick of it, the ineptitude. So let's talk about a little bit the safety angle. So they're telling us that the safety is a factor for reducing from 30 to 25. We know that's BS, but let's follow along with the safety issue, and let's first, why are interactions with automobiles and pedestrians so dangerous today? What's going on? So first, the average age of an automobile is about 13 years old. Like 4 or 5 years ago, it was 11. It's going up. And they're not being properly maintained. They're certainly not being inspected. And as example, inadequate tire pressure can affect handling and stopping. I think, if you want to have a progressive agenda, how about requiring all the gas stations to offer free air and tire pressure gauges so that people can make sure their tires are properly filled up. Another thing, you got worn, faulty brakes, old brake fluid, oxidized plastic headlamps. Remember they used to be glass bulbs, you replace the whole thing. Now it's a composite plastic. It oxidizes. It becomes opaque. It severely diminishes the light output. The driver can't see. There's not enough light. People wear dark clothes at light. They drive their bikes, walk around in dark clothes. You can't see them, and you hit them. So that's one issue of the safety. So let's go on screen with the image of the SUV front, Exhibit G. Take a look. Now this is for demonstrative purposes, but look at the bumper height of the sedan versus the SUV. It's quite a bit higher. And so, since 2009, SUVs have kind of taken over the market, as have trucks. Nobody wants to be riding around in a subcompact death box sedan when you got a semi-tractor trailer that might run into you or somebody else hits you. You're going to get killed. So what was your choice? You had to go to an SUV. But it's not so pedestrian friendly, because guess what happens? Take a look and you see, you get hit by that car, you're going to go over the hood. You got a chance. You get hit by that SUV, you're not going over it. Look at it. You're going to go under that vehicle, and you're going to become a statistic at that point. The other thing affecting safety is the higher center of gravity of a SUV or truck renders them inherently more unstable in an emergency maneuver Never mind the gyroscopic effect of the much larger diameter rims and tires and braking. And let's go to the fast yellow lights. Can we go to Exhibit H? So, as the text provides, if you have reduced the time for the yellow light from 3 seconds, where it should be, or more, down to 2.9, this suggests that it's going to add another $8 million forked over by unsuspecting drivers. This was done during the Emanuel administration. The yellow lights are not long enough. Again, what is a yellow light? It tells you to be prepared to stop if safe to do so. You got a guy riding your ass, you can't stop for that yellow. You got to go through, otherwise you're going to get rear-ended. How safe is that? So you're going slower, you can't stop, you got to go through the light, you're going to get more tickets. And that's the whole game here. The other thing that's affecting our safety, let's go on screen with Cheech and Chong. Okay, who's been on the expressway and there's a guy in front of you, you're traveling 60 miles an hour, and you can smell someone smoking pot in front of you. I don't know why that is, but I can. I'm behind somebody, oh, they're riding on the shoulder at 60 miles an hour, you can smell the pot. Why aren't they doing anything about that? Okay, so next I'd like to segue into why, off screen with, I like Cheech and Chong, but off screen. Next I'm going to segue into what happened to the Democratic National Convention in Chicago and why poor Kamala Harris got trounced in the election. Well, we have JABA. Let's go on screen with JABA and Mayor Johnson. Guess what they did? They're poking President-elect Trump about the immigrants. So Trump's going to make Chicago ground zero for the immigration purge. Then we have Judge Thaddeus Wilson rule against Trump Tower over the use of river water. Bad idea, Thaddeus, improvidently done, and Chicago is going to pay the price. We're lucky if we keep the red line expansion funds and they're not disgorged or they do a clawback. Next thing I'd like to talk about, let's go off screen, the Jussie Smollett case. The Illinois Supreme Court didn't address the merits of what he did. It was a double jeopardy, okay? The case was dismissed. There were terms. It was bilateral. Keep your bond, do some public service. Jeopardy applied. Then they wanted to bring the case up again. That's double jeopardy. They tried him, convicted him. He did it all. Then went to the Illinois Supreme Court. Nobody understood it. It was about you can't try a person twice. Once jeopardy applies, that's it, double jeopardy. You can't try somebody for a crime twice. I'd like to we'll visit with David Chappelle he talks about Jussie Smollett. Smollett did considerable damage to the progressive movement and made Chicago the laughing stock of the country. We probably should have moved the Democratic National Convention to Atlanta or some other place. Why would they stay in Chicago? They had Chicago. Go to Atlanta or swing state. But they didn't do that. They kept it here because Johnson and JABA, they wanted to be invited to talk. In Atlanta, probably not. Let's go on screen with David Chappelle's version of events with Jussie. Next, we'll hear from Tucker Carlson on topic. He's not my favorite host. He's no longer with Fox, but let's hear what he has to say.
Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. A ton going on as always, but we couldn't resist noting that actor Jussie Smollett finally went on trial this week. for faking a hate crime in Chicago way back in 2019. I want to put a little bow on that news story, which you probably remember well. Smollett faces 6 felony charges for what he did. He could spend 3 years in prison if he's convicted on all of them. Smollett's lawyers have argued hilariously that he is, quote, the real victim in this story, but of course no sober person on the planet believes that. Jussie Smollett definitely faked a hate crime. The question is, how did anyone, anywhere, ever fall for this story, even for a moment? Looking back, particularly in retrospect, it was maybe the most obvious hoax ever perpetrated. And in case you've forgotten the details of them and would like to savor them tonight, well, here's what Smollett claimed. Smollett claimed that he left his apartment in Chicago alone one freezing January night at 2 a.m. to pick up a Subway sandwich, something that no one who isn't homeless has ever done. As he walked down the street, 2 white men approached him and began screaming in his face for being black and gay, because of course you're not allowed to be either one of those things in the city of Chicago. They called him the N-word, they punched him in the face, they poured a chemical onto his body, and then, needless to say, they wrapped a noose around his neck because, Chicago. They didn't bother to rob him. Their motives were purely political. This is MAGA country, they screamed about a city that voted more than 83% for Hillary Clinton. So that's the story that Jussie Smollett told the police that night, a noose still hanging around his neck. The police, it's fair to say, were highly skeptical. The leaders of the Democratic Party, however, were not skeptical at all. In fact, the story he told was the story they were already telling. That same year, several Democratic senators, including notably Kamala Harris of California, a personal friend of Jussie Smollett's, sent a letter to the Justice Department. The letter claimed that attacks from white supremacist Trump voters were among this country's greatest threats. Attacks by black supremacists, by contrast, were not even real. In fact, Harris lectured the DOJ, saying the very term black supremacist is a, quote, fabricated term based on a faulty assessment of a small number of isolated incidents, end quote. In other words, only Trump voters commit hate crimes. And of course, the media have been telling us that ever since. Here's one recent headline from CNN, quote, hate crime reports in the U.S. surged to the highest level in 12 years, FBI says. Where's all this hate coming from? Well, according to CNN, it's anti-immigrant rhetoric. NPR covered it at your expense. It's National Public Radio. And in their coverage, they came out and blamed people who voted for Donald Trump. All these white supremacists, NPR explained, are mad about COVID, so they're beating up Asians in the streets of San Francisco and New York. Just as Kamala Harris told us, white supremacy is the problem. So where do these numbers come from? The numbers upon which all these stories are hung and all these political points are made, all these lies are told. Well, here's how the Department of Justice under Joe Biden concluded that we have, quote, more hate crimes than we've had in 12 years. First, they changed the definition of hate crime. Now, a hate crime, by the way, is that even a real category of crime? How is it different from a crime? But it is, apparently. And it now includes something called discrimination based on gender identity. Well, no one can quite agree on what that is, but it's a crime. Then the FBI noticed that nearly 90% of law enforcement agencies across the country had been reporting no hate crimes within their jurisdictions, because actually there's not a lot of hate in the country because it's a pretty nice country. Most people are not racist at all. Most people are really kind. They're Americans. But that's not a conclusion we can sell to CNN or NPR or get elected on in the midterm. So the Biden Justice Department badgered an additional 600 federal law enforcement agencies and local police departments into reporting hate crimes under this new expanded definition of the term hate crime. So if you're following this, hate crimes, whatever those are, didn't actually rise in frequency. The number of agencies that were commanded to report hate crimes went up quite dramatically. And then the FBI encouraged law enforcement agencies to report any possible hate crime, even if the crime derived from an obviously false report. And that's why more than 80% of the hate crime suspects investigated by the feds from 2005 to 2019 were never prosecuted. Why is that? Because they were fake. But they still show up in the statistics, and they still allow NPR to tell you that people who disagree with Anthony Fauci are beating up Asians on the street in New York. Right. So it's a fiction. It's yet another lie engineered by the Biden administration and carried forth as fact by the media. They did it for political reasons. They've been doing it for years, in fact. In fact, they've done it for so long, they started to believe it was actually true. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why they took Jussie Smollett seriously when no normal person would. The story was absurd from the very first day, but they believed it completely. In case you've forgotten, here was their response.
We've got some breaking news. Actor and musician Jussie Smollett from the hit show Empire was attacked and beaten early this morning in Chicago, and police say it could be a hate crime.
There are many indications of a hate crime here. They are looking for two suspects who were apparently wearing Make America Great Again hats.
We have a media that's saying it's a debate whether or not what just happened to Jussie Smollett is a hate crime. It's absurd.
You know, Jussie Smollett had a noose on his neck just this week.
And the media has really cast so much doubt on his story, which I find so personally offensive, that a gay black man is targeted and then suddenly he becomes the victim of people's disbelief.
He said his attackers hurled racial and homophobic slurs at him. And this is America in 2019.
A lot of talking with the eyes closed, a lot of empathy, a lot of empathy. We should note, by the way, that Jussie Smollett was also, in addition to being an actor, a musician. What instrument? We have no idea, but he's a musician, too. Anyway, this is America in 2019, we just heard from CNN. And that was true, actually, but not in the way the robot on CNN meant it. By 2019 in America, it was actually getting pretty difficult for the average black person to get beaten up on the street for having the wrong skin color. As Jussie Smollett found out personally, if you wanted to have racists throw bleach in your face and hang a noose around your neck, you had to pay Nigerian bodybuilders to do it. And the going rate at the time was $3,500. That's not cheap, but then violent anti-black racism was getting extremely hard to find. It was a rare commodity. And yet somehow ABC News was not aware of any of this. At ABC News, it is always 1958 in Mississippi. So to the geniuses at ABC News, this sounded totally plausible, completely. Jussie Smollett could sense this, and he took full advantage of it. Watch this.
I see the attacker masked, and he said, "This MAGA country," punches me right in the face.
And there is no doubt in your mind what motivated this attack?
I could only go off of their words. I mean, who says empire, this MAGA country, ties a noose around your neck and pours bleach on you?
So downtown Chicago, such a seething hotbed of support for Donald Trump that progressive black actors can no longer walk down the street without risking being lynched. It's MAGA country in downtown Chicago. Now, who wouldn't laugh at that? Well, let's see. Robin Roberts of ABC, she didn't laugh. It sounded absolutely real to her. So she let Jussie Smollett keep rolling.
Why do you think you were targeted?
I can just assume, I mean, I come really, really hard against 45.
It's the highest paid woman in television. But as Jussie Smollett explained to her, I came really, really hard at 45, meaning Donald Trump. So if you lived here at the time in America 2019, that makes kind of sense. Back in 2019, very few actors had the bravery to criticize the fascist Trump regime. They were just too afraid. So instead they went along with it like Quislings. The Oscars were like a MAGA rally that year. To speak out against Donald Trump from Hollywood was to risk your very life. White supremacist thugs were likely to attack you with nooses on your way back from Subway. And that's why we remember Jussie Smollett for his unique courage. Virtually alone in our media landscape, Smollett was willing to take the risk. He publicly admitted that he votes for the Democratic Party. Now, his friends pleaded with him to stay quiet about this and to stay safe. That's the kind of man Jussie Smollett is. He wouldn't. Some called him a hero for that. His friend Kamala Harris did. Harris described what happened to Jussie Smollett as a, quote, attempted modern-day lynching. Nancy Pelosi said it was a homophobic attack and an affront to our humanity. Eric Swalwell of California told us there were countless Jussie Smolletts in this filthy racist nation of ours. Quote, hate crimes like this are happening more frequently, egged on by careless, hate-filled rhetoric. Notice the redundancy. Senator Cory Booker, meanwhile, demanded anti-lynching legislation, as if we didn't already have that, and so on. So in a landscape like this, with the most powerful people in the country cheering him on like a modern Dietrich Bonhoeffer, is it really surprising that Jussie Smollett just pushed it as far as he could? No, it's not very surprising. What's surprising is that absolutely nothing Smollett said, no matter how transparently ridiculous or melodramatic or embarrassing or obviously non-factual, no matter what he said, none of it aroused even the slightest hint of skepticism of any kind from hardened newswoman Robert Roberts of ABC. Jussie Smollett could have claimed absolutely anything. Trump killed my family. Trump and Vladimir Putin burned a cross in my yard. And Robert Roberts would have had the same reaction. Awestruck love. Watch this.
It's been 2 weeks since that night left actor Jussie Smollett bruised but not broken.
I still want to believe, with everything that has happened, that there's something called justice. Because if I stop believing that, then what's it all for? Thank you, Jussie.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jussie. He's bruised, not broken. Is there anyone who writes scripts at ABC who doesn't speak entirely in cliches? Not yet. Well, eventually, thank God, the police took over. Robert Roberts had to relinquish control over the story. The cops interviewed the people in the end who Jussie Smollett had hired to beat him up, the two black guys. Turns out Smollett had paid for the noose and the bleach. So you got to ask, once the evidence arrived, how did all of his supporters react? How did, for example, his friend Kamala Harris respond to this news? Well, here she is.
Your initial tweet of him, would you like to make an amendment to your original sentiment?
Which tweet? What tweet?
About saying that it is a modern day lynching, that...
Sorry.
Yes, Jussie Smollett.
Okay, so I will say this about that case. I think that the facts are still unfolding, and I'm very concerned about, obviously, the initial allegation that he made about what might have happened.
So would you like to adjust your hysteria to the facts? Would you like to acknowledge reality? No, I don't think so. It's still about white racism, still about MAGA country in downtown Chicago. So obviously there's a pretty inconvenient story for the people who bought it hook, line, and sinker. Not only are they dishonest, but a lot of them are really dumb. That's their main secret. So after this happened, Kamala Harris's allies got to work making the story go away. A Michelle Obama aide reached out to a partisan DA in Chicago called Kim Foxx and had charges against Jussie Smollett dismissed. Oh, that's what happens when you have friends. You're so powerless you can get Michelle Obama to make it go away. But now, thankfully, for the sake of the justice Smollett says he wanted, that decision has been reversed. So finally this week, the Smollett trial is underway. He's on trial for lying about the attack. And as part of the trial, learning some pretty interesting new information about the extent of the scam. For example, the same day that Jussie Smollett cried in his interview with Robin Roberts, which he described as beautiful, Jussie, beautiful, he was texting one of the people he claims beat him up because he's black and gay. And here's what he wrote. "Brother, I love you. I stand with you," Smollett wrote. "I know 100% you and your brother did nothing wrong." These are the people he paid to put a noose around his neck. Smollett was also on videotape conducting a dry run of the attack the day before it happened. You're not hearing a ton about this in the media. Why is that? Because it undermines the core claim that they are making, which is people who vote for candidates they don't like are dangerous. People of a certain color are dangerous. The violence in America is committed by their political enemies, when in fact, that's a lie. And we know it's a lie because there are real numbers out there, and you're welcome to look them up if you like. And they do not tell you that Trump voters are the ones behind the crime wave currently in progress. So once you learn that one thing is a lie, you might start to ask yourself, what else are they lying about? And that's not a process they welcome.
A conservative viewpoint by Tucker Carlson. The purpose in airing that diatribe was to expand on why what happened with I believe, in the presidential election. Chicago was showcased, highlighted in an unfavorable, unflattering light. They should have moved the Democratic National Convention out of Chicago, Atlanta, any place else, but we were made a laughingstock of the country, and all that episode did was to fortify the opinions of those that might have been deciding who they're going to vote for. It was a real problem. I'm going to segue quickly into a FOIA that I did on the city of Chicago. So Exhibit M, if we have a minute. News story about Chicago police officers impregnating Venezuelan migrants at the police station on duty, okay, off screen. I propounded a FOIA. I asked for that information, the names of the officers, any pregnancy reports, what was done, investigations. They denied my FOIA. Oh, it's 500 pages. Well, exactly how many immigrants and migrants did they impregnate? So they don't want to turn it over, and it's an embarrassment. Let's go to next exhibit, what happened after that story broke. Oh, a police scene, crime scene. They got crime scene tape up at the police station. Well, you know, what are they looking for? The semen sniper? Got to find DNA evidence someplace? No. They moved all of the migrants out of the police stations, all of them. You know, they figure they couldn't trust the police with the migrants. Now, this isn't all of them. Most of the officers are pretty good people. But they covered this up. They denied, did all the things that they could to cover it up, and I can't get any information out of the city of Chicago relating to any of this. In fact, let's go off screen. Another FOIA I propounded on the city of Chicago is asking for information relating to the police stations and how they were all equipped and set up to house the migrants. As we all know, it was on the news everywhere. You saw migrants in the police stations. You saw that image. There were migrants in the police station. So I do a Freedom of Information Act request to Chicago Police Department. They say they don't have any responsive documents. So I quipped back. I said, hey, well, what about the migrants sitting in the stations, all the pictures, all that? Nope, we don't have any responsive information. They're liars. Part of the problem is, you know, and I'm going to use the last few minutes. Mayor Johnson did do one good thing. He got rid of Shot Tracker. Can't have police officers showing up at a scene, see two people, they're not committing a crime, then they get out of their vehicle, chase them, and shoot one. Adam Toledo, remember that case, anybody? Well, that's almost coming to trial. So I do give Mayor Johnson credit for keeping his word on that. Now let him do the same with the red light cameras and the speeding cameras. That'll conclude our show for tonight. I thank you for listening. If you have any input, feel free to send it along to the station. We look forward to content and input for future shows. I thank you and good night.